We're shifting to the leafy greens, and this is my last section. And then I also include a summary at the end. Here's our pyramid. Pay attention to these fundamental levels and work your way up to the more toxic levels for the most effective disease management. So once again, start with clean planting materials. High organic matter is important, particularly important for leafy greens. Plant varieties with resistance to common diseases. There are many lettuce varieties with resistance to downy mildew. There are some with resistance to bacterial diseases in general. You want to be checking seed packets for those measures of resistance. What's convenient about some of the brassica leafy greens is that they tend to be fairly disease tolerant. And so while resistance there's been less breeding work for resistance in those brassica type leafy greens, it's because they haven't needed it quite as much. They can tolerate some disease pressure. Plants should be spaced appropriately. Leaf moisture is important to manage here. And then mulch is also very important. So when folks are mulching plants, they don't want to mulch right up to the stem of the plant. They want to leave a bit of a perimeter, because if that mulch is too close to the plant, once in a while it can harbor some of these secondary type pathogens that take advantage of that humid area between the crop stem and the mulch. And so here are two botrytis diseases on lettuce. This is a Botrytis Crown Rot, which at first glance it looks like a damping off, but that's actually caused by a true fungus, Botrytis. Botrytis can also cause this leaf blight in lettuce. In mid and late season, we shift to more of our upper levels of the integrated pest management pyramid. And so important tactics here are things like removing plants that have damped off, roguing out these plants and carrying them far off site. Don't just toss them into the yard so they can be mowed, and the mower clippings can be shot right back into the garden. You want to carry those far off site. Manage the weeds early. I think I've emphasized that quite a bit in this presentation. Avoid foliar wetness, and then protect plants with copper applications. There's relatively, some of our other chemistries are not labeled for leafy greens, and so the primary recommendation here is copper for leafy greens. Here's a picture of what damping off looks like on very small lettuce seedlings. You can see that darkened area on the root, and then up to where the soil line would be. Here's lettuce downy mildew, and you can see again, I mentioned with cucurbit downy mildew that the sporulation is bounded by leaf veins. That's also the case for lettuce downy mildew. Those are not caused by the same pathogen, they're caused by different pathogens, but the reason they're kind of lumped into the downy mildews is they can cause some of the same symptoms, even though they're different pathogens. And so here's our recap. Garden disease management is effective garden disease management is focused on proactive and preventative approaches. And so these are things like using resistant varieties, starting with clean planting material, creating an unfavorable environment for disease by maintaining leaf dryness, and reducing contact with soil. Mulch is extremely important in the home garden. Working plants when they're dry will prevent spreading disease through the garden, and it'll reduce plant injury. And then management of weeds and removing infected material will help decrease disease. This is the last slide. Along with those proactive approaches, you want to be scouting plots regularly. Keeping track of disease in the garden can only put you in a better position for next year. There's actually some apps that help folks keep track of where they've planted what in the garden. This is particularly important for folks that are trying out different varieties so they know how they perform. And then at the end of the season, The removal of plant debris is very important. Those shouldn't be composted if they're infected, because compost piles don't get hot enough to remove the pathogens from that material. It's best if you just throw them in the trash can. And so with that, really helpful tools for you all when you go on garden visits are these Ipm Scouting Guides. We've designed them such that the major diseases are covered, and they've got excellent full color photos in them. And with that concludes my presentation.